Hello and welcome to episode 77 of the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today I'm going to be sharing some results. That was a drum roll. That was a rubbish drum roll. With you because I launched a quiz in October. So, towards the end of October, I launched a quiz to help you find out whether you were stuck in a low confidence cycle. And if you've already been listening to the podcast, you may have already taken that quiz. Now, the idea of creating that quiz was to give people a quick and easy way of seeing whether they had habits that were keeping them less confident than they wanted to be. Whether they could self-identify through that quiz, some of the habits and patterns that can keep you stuck in lower confidence. I call it a low confidence cycle, and give you some help with that to help you see where you are, i.e., to help you see whether you are in a low confidence cycle, to give you some confidence that it's just a set of habits that are keeping you stuck there. And those are habits that you are in charge of and that you can change. And then to kind of help give people a few tools and ideas and resources to take away so that they can start moving from that low confidence cycle and eventually support them to move into a high confidence cycle. So that's all of the work that I do with people, really. But the idea of this quiz was that it could help you to do all of that. And I started looking at the preliminary results the other day of that quiz to see whether there was anything interesting that had come out and anything that I could glean as to what habits people were identifying with, where they could where I could see results that might, shine a light on something or be interesting. And the results were interesting. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to share those preliminary results with you guys so that you can hear them too. And if you haven't already done the quiz and you want to do it, hop on over to the show notes and click the link. And it's called Are You Stuck in a Low Confidence Cycle? It'll take you less than 5 minutes, probably take like 3 minutes to complete. And then you'll get some help and some resources to not only figure out whether you are stuck in a low confidence cycle, but if you are, I'll help you think about why you are and what you can do about it. But I thought, well, it's worth sharing some of the preliminary results because there have been 670 responses so far. And hopefully that's just going to build. And the reason that I did this, as I said, was to give you an easy kind of snapshot way into the work that I do and to be able to see whether you're in a low confidence cycle and then to get some help to deal with it if you were and if you wanted that help. But what I didn't think that this quiz would do, which it is doing already, is give me some really interesting data about the specific things that people are struggling with. Now, I'm asking whether you're stuck in a low confidence cycle. And that is basically a set of habits which you unconsciously adopt at work. And while you're adopting those habits, it will tend to keep you stuck in this low confidence cycle, in a cycle of not feeling as confident as you want. And in the quiz, I ask questions to work out whether or not you have those habits and whether or not you therefore are in a low confidence cycle or not. And the more habits that you identify, which I ask about, the more likely it is that you're in a low confidence cycle. And so far, we have results from, and this is to do with seniority, because one of the things I was interested in was, okay, well, how senior are people who are answering this quiz? So that was one of the questions that I asked. And the more senior, there is 24% of people who've taken this quiz that would class themselves as senior. There are 50% who would class themselves as mid-senior and 26% who class themselves as more junior. So 75% basically are senior or more senior. So as you're listening to this, just bear that in mind. So don't be thinking, this is a particular problem for people who are more junior in their career or who are, further down in terms of the promotion scale. No, this is something that can apply across the board. And for the people who filled in this quiz, for the people who, have obviously self-selected in to find out whether they're stuck in a low confidence cycle, 75% of them essentially would say they are mid-senior to senior. So I'm going to dig into the questions that I asked and the responses which came back. And the very first question, remember I said this is habits, patterns, behaviors which constitute the low confidence cycle. And the first one of those that I always ask people about without fail is, are you self-critical at work? Do you tend to criticize yourself? And 86% of people said yes. Now, I knew that that would be high because how many of us are taught about self-criticism and about the impact that it can have on us and how harmful it can be, and then taught, well, this is how you deal with it? Virtually no one is taught that. And I was reminded of that when I was coaching with a client this week. And we were doing work to think about how to quiet the inner critic. And that was one of the things that we were talking about. Nobody really talks about this stuff. So everyone's kind of inside their own head, maybe being really self-critical. Well, apparently 86% of you are inside your own head being really self-critical. But because nobody else can hear it, nothing necessarily gets done about it. And because people mainly don't talk about it, how would you even know that, one, it could be any different? Or two, think to even question, like, should this be happening? Or is there anything that I can do about it? And there is something that you can do about it. But first, you have to be able to identify it. So I thought it was interesting that 86% of people said that they tend to criticize themselves at work and they're self-critical. And with that client that I was coaching, one of the things that I shared with her was a piece of research. It's quite a heavily researched area, actually, which is good. But a specific piece of research that I always think back to, which shows that if these research participants were asked, they were hooked up to monitors, and they had people criticize them, and they tested their physiological response and their brain response. And what basically happened, as you can imagine, was it created like a stress response in somebody to be criticized. And what they found was that then when they asked people, there was no one criticizing them from the outside, but they asked people to criticize themselves, like inside their heads. That also created that same stress response as if somebody else was criticizing them. And most people don't really recognize that the kind of criticism that they've got going on inside their head could be creating that kind of stress response and could be having an impact on the quality of their work, on their productivity, on how they feel, and really, for the work I do, on their confidence. And it's easy to see. If somebody was criticizing you all the time, you wouldn't feel too confident. Well, that's what's happening when you're criticizing yourself all the time. And that's why this is a really key component. If you are being really self-critical, you may be stuck in a low confidence cycle when, if you learn how to manage and deal with that internal narrative and that self-criticism, and you could be feeling a hell of a lot better. So the second question was, do you tend to doubt yourself at work? And 80% of people who responded to this quiz said that they tended to doubt themselves at work. And again, this is one of those areas where if somebody else were doubting you every time they handed you a piece of work, they were like, don't really know if you can do that. Not really sure whether you're capable. Should you have really been given this job? I really don't know whether you were the best person for this. You know that if that was happening all the time, you'd be feeling terrible. But for 80% of people who answered this quiz, that is happening inside, albeit that nobody else can hear it, maybe. When that is happening, that doubt, that pervasive, unmanaged self-doubt is detrimental to confidence. The third question was, do you find yourself focusing on how other people are perceiving you? And I included this one because this is something that I see a lot with my clients, and it's part of that low confidence cycle because we can get really in our heads about what other people are thinking about us, how are they feeling about us, what do we need to do to get them to think and feel a certain way. And to be honest, when all that noise is going on and when all of that overthinking is going on and checking and being very perceptive, it can be detrimental to our confidence. It's a lot of mental noise, and it just, on top of everything else you already have to deal with at work, it creates this kind of buzzy cloud that you then have to work within. And 84% of people said, who answered this quiz, that they find themselves focusing on how other people are perceiving them. Now, it's normal to care, I think, what other people think about you, especially in a work context. But this goes a bit beyond that. This goes into, I find myself actually focused on that, when really what I could be focused on is like the work or what I have to do today or, whatever it is I'm trying to deliver. Instead, I find myself caught up in focusing on how other people are perceiving me. The next question was, do you ever feel like you're faking it at work and are kind of unable to be yourself? And this was a mixed picture, but still 60% of people who answered the quiz said that they do find themselves faking it and unable to be themselves at work. And I know it's common, like received wisdom, isn't it? Fake it till you make it. But constantly faking it, I find, keeps people stuck in a low confidence cycle. And I think possibly, this is going to be different for everyone, but possibly if you were told, oh, do you know what? The way you are is not quite acceptable, and nobody should really know how you're feeling or what you're thinking or how you actually are. I think you should probably cover it up. I think you should probably fake it. That would be better than how you actually are or showing what's actually going on for you. If somebody actually said that, you'd be like, wait a minute, how rude. But if that's constantly going on inside you, you can imagine it wouldn't be that great for confidence. Then question number 5 is, do you find yourself thinking things which increase the pressure on you? And to explain this, I like to think about whether there are some hecklers living in your brain. So all of us have thoughts about things at work. And sometimes the things we think can increase the pressure. So you might also think of that as the stories that you tell inside your head, and that can increase the pressure on you. Stories like, if I was going to do a podcast, for instance, I could have a story in my head, or I could have a thought like, oh gosh, this is going to be rubbish. This is going to be a bad episode. What are people going to think of me? This isn't going to go well. This is going to ruin my reputation, right? I could be thinking all of those things. And they would be examples of finding myself thinking things which increase the pressure on me. And 73% of people who answered the quiz said they find themselves routinely thinking things which are increasing the pressure on them. Now, you can imagine, again, if somebody outside of you, like your boss or your colleague, was constantly saying things to you that increase the pressure, especially when you're trying to do something difficult or that's outside your comfort zone, you would find that incredibly hard. Well, how many percentage was it again? Let me find it. 73% of you, you are thinking things which increase the pressure on you. And you're going to really notice that increases that stress response, and it makes it harder for you to do the things you're trying to do, especially the stuff that's a bit outside of your comfort zone, because that's probably when those stories are going to be louder and more pervasive. And not only will it increase your stress response, it will lower your capacity to be present and to think clearly. All of the things that are going to build and boost your confidence. So, question number 6 was around the standards that you have, or the next set of questions around the standards that you hold for yourself. And I asked, do you identify with this statement, I should get everything perfect? Now, I could have asked the question, I suppose, do you identify as a perfectionist? But that's essentially what this question means. And 55% of you said, yes, you do. So you may think that being a perfectionist and wanting to get everything right is a good thing. And you know what? It does have a lot of good benefit for your employer or for your clients or whoever, but it can have a negative impact on your confidence. And if you're expecting the most perfect standards from yourself all the time, maybe standards that can't be achieved or that are unrealistic given the resources you have, or just unrealistic because maybe you're doing something for the first time, that can be detrimental to your confidence. So the next question I asked again was around standards, and I asked, would it impact your confidence if you made a mistake? And what do you know? 86% of people said yes, it would. And you might think, well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? If I make a mistake, that's going to impact my confidence. Well, this is actually just part of a low confidence cycle because mistakes are part of our working lives. It may be that we make one big mistake in our career. It may be that we make a series of smaller ones. It may be that we do even more than that. Who knows? But it's just a normal part of being a human. And what happens if every time you make a mistake, you have that impacting your confidence? There's something happening in between there. Because I could make a mistake, right, in my job, but still feel confident. And if I was still feeling confident, I'd be thinking something like, well, that sucked, but I'm still here. I still know what I'm doing and I'm going to carry on, right? I would be able to maintain my confidence even when I'd made a mistake. But what this answer tells me, so if you've said yes, it would impact my confidence if I made a mistake, and that's 86% of you. What that tells me is when you make that mistake, you're thinking something which then erodes your confidence. And those thoughts could be something like, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have made that mistake. I'm rubbish at what I do. I'm rubbish at my job. I'm not worthy of this. And I know all of that because I made a mistake in my career. And those were all of the things that I thought day after day, month after month. And it eroded my confidence so badly. So I know when I was stuck in a low confidence cycle, it massively impacted my confidence when I made a mistake. So this is one of the things that we have to learn how to deal with. Is the reality is that we're going to make a mistake, and we have to learn how to approach that and how to think about that in a way that supports us to be able to actually maintain our confidence when things go wrong. The next question was around whether do you compare yourself to other people? And I always say to people, this is part of a low confidence cycle, right? Comparing yourself. And you can see why. Like if you were being compared to your peers, for example, oh, she always gets that right, or he seems to do this much better than you. It wouldn't be great, would it? You'd be thinking, great, thanks very much. Like, thanks for helping us all stay in our own lane. It wouldn't be good for confidence. But I always say this is relevant to some people and not relevant to others because I don't see this in every low confidence cycle. But the answers are 66% of the people that answered this said they do compare themselves to other people at work. And that is definitely part of that low confidence cycle. The next set of questions are all around whether you're able to acknowledge yourself for the work you do. And I asked if you're able to focus on the positives and your achievements, or do you tend to focus on the negatives? And this was a kind of split, actually. So, are you able to focus on the positives and your achievements, or do you tend to focus on the negatives? So, 54% of people said, I can see both. And 45% of people said, I tend to focus on the negatives. So being able to see both the positives and the negatives is part of a higher confidence cycle. And tending to focus on the negatives is part of a low confidence cycle, and you can see why. Imagine if your boss or somebody significant who you work with only ever focused in on the negatives. They only ever mentioned it when anything went wrong. That was the only thing they ever discussed with you, and it was the only thing they ever seemed to notice. You would find that difficult, and eventually I think it would start to erode your confidence. And that's what's happening for you if you're in that 45% where you tend to focus on the negatives. It's like somebody is kind of whitewashing everything that you've done well, and rather than acknowledging that and helping you to see the positives as well as those negatives, they're just tending to dwell on and focus on those negatives. So it shows you quite a skewed picture of your impact and your expertise and how you're doing. So, of course, that doesn't lead to you feeling particularly confident. And that's why it's part of that low confidence cycle. And the next question was, do you need someone to tell you you're doing a good job? And the answers were yes. Otherwise, I'm wondering whether I'm doing a good job. Or no, I know that I'm doing a good job even if nobody tells me. And 71% of people said, I need someone to tell me that I'm doing a good job. Otherwise, I'm wondering whether I am. And that is actually part of the low confidence cycle. And the reason for that is that often we don't get that kind of feedback that we want. We don't have someone patting us on the head and saying, you're doing a really good job. Especially when we get to being mid-senior or more senior, and that's 75% of you who answered this quiz fall into that category. So probably 75% of you fall into the category of people who don't receive that kind of feedback on a regular basis. So that means that many of you are left wondering, am I doing a good job? And you can imagine what your brain fills in the gaps. Maybe I'm not doing a good job. I really need somebody to tell me. So if we were going to get you into a high confidence cycle on that point, we'd have you feeling a bit more safe and a bit more secure in the fact that you are doing a good job. Otherwise, somebody would tell you. So it's kind of flipped around on its head. No, you don't need someone to tell you you're doing a good job because you can just assume that you are unless somebody tells you. And then the last kind of substantive question about the low confidence cycle, it was, I can give myself praise and acknowledgement for the work that I do. And 58% said yes, 42% said no. And it takes me ages to read those percentages because I'm rounding. If something's above a 0.5, I'm rounding. And I'd actually like to give myself a little bit of acknowledgement there. I've just done a lot of rounding in my head quite fast. Well done, me. Well done, Anna. That's not the easiest thing that you do, but you did it. So just pause to give myself acknowledgement there. And it's a perfect question to do that because that is part of a high confidence cycle. So if you're able to give yourself praise and acknowledgement for the stuff that you do, that helps you to be within a high confidence cycle. And if you can't, so 42% of people said they can't, that's likely to keep you stuck in a low confidence cycle. And you can see why. So we tend to want other people to do the praising and acknowledging for us. But as we said before, most of us are in a position where we don't really get that. So if we can't do it for ourselves, that means no one's doing it. No one's giving us praise or feedback or acknowledgement, mostly, not all the time, but mostly for the stuff that we do. Most of us don't put that on our own job description, even though we probably should. And if you were to have a high confidence job description, maybe I should draft one of those. Idea for another day. Then giving yourself praise and acknowledgement for the stuff you actually do, and even just for the effort that you make and for showing up and for giving your energy and your attention and your work and your hours to the things that you do. And I'm not talking about, yay, I'm going to acknowledge myself and look in the mirror and be like, you're so great, Anna. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm like, yeah, Anna, actually, you showed up today and made a podcast when you weren't sure whether you were feeling well enough. Or you did some really boring end of year accountant stuff this morning when you really didn't feel like it. And you coached 4 of your clients today and you did that well. You gave them a lot of time and attention. Yes. That's not me being like, oh, Anna, you're so great. Because that probably feels a bit weird and fake to most people. But That's the kind of acknowledgement and praise I'm talking about, which feels fine and probably would feel fine to you too if you got used to it. And that is part of being in a high confidence cycle. So, some interesting, I hope you would agree, preliminary results. And maybe you listened through those and thought, I'm actually in there because I already did this quiz. And I found out that maybe I am stuck in a low confidence cycle, or maybe you found out that you're in a high confidence cycle. But if you haven't taken the quiz, click on into the show notes and add to this data set, because I really could have thought about the fact that this would be useful data set for me before, but I wasn't thinking of it in that way. I was thinking of it in the way to help you identify whether you're in a low confidence cycle and then help you to figure out how to get out of it. That was my primary intention. But this fabulous secondary benefit that I've got from doing this is I can now see the areas where most people are, or the highest numbers of people are struggling. What particular habits are people struggling with? So when we look at self-criticism, we're like, that's up. 86% of you are struggling with that. 80% of you are struggling with self-doubt. 84% of you are struggling with focusing on how other people are perceiving you. 73% of you are struggling with, telling yourselves thoughts and stories that increase the pressure on you and that make things more difficult. So I've got that now. And I promise, thank you to all of you who fulfilled in that quiz and added to that data set, because that's going to help me to help you with the things that you're struggling with. And it's going to help me understand where you're at, whether you're in a low confidence cycle. And if you are, where can I tailor things to really help you change your habits so that you can get into a higher confidence cycle? And you can do it. Nobody is immune from being able to do this. It's a set of habits, it's a set of patterns that you might have unconsciously adopted that have landed you in a low confidence cycle. And as soon as you can identify what they are and get a bit of help from doing the quiz to work out what you need to do next to get into a higher confidence cycle, I promise you could make a lot of headway with your confidence, your professional confidence in 2024. And I'd be honored to walk alongside you as you do that and to help you to do that. And one of the ways that I'm going to help you to do that, as well as taking the quiz, is I'm running a free class. If you're listening to this episode before Monday, the 8th of Jan at 6:30 p.m. GMT, you can sign up for the Grow Your Professional Confidence Masterclass. That class is one step further than this quiz. So I'm going to take you through the high and low confidence cycles and help you make a plan, an actual plan, a workable plan that you can take away that's going to help you move from a low to a high confidence cycle. You are warmly invited, and feel free to share the invite with your teams, with your department, with your people, with your colleagues, with your friends. I want to share with as many people as possible this year in 2024 about how you can actually take some practical, doable steps to grow your professional confidence and feel more confident and calm and in control at work. So I'll leave those links in the show notes, and I will see you in next week's episode. Bye. Okay, I forgot to tell you about something I should really have remembered to tell you about, because if you're still with me, thank you. Because I am at the moment selling the course which is going to help you with all these low confidence habits. And I was so caught up in being like, I want to tell the people what they're doing and how they can stop doing it so they can feel more confident. And I was like, I forgot that there was one very particular way in which, for the whole of 2024, I could help you if you want to come and work with me. And that course, it's like a digital training course. So some of it is self-paced learning and some of it is coming for group coaching calls or just listening in on the group coaching calls, where we're going to be diving into all of those high and low confidence habits. And I'm going to be teaching you for every one, whether that is dealing with your inner critic and quietening it down, whether it's how to deal with self-doubt that you experience at work, whether it's having to deal with being a perfectionist or learning how to acknowledge yourself for the work that you do, whether it is being reliant on other people telling you you're doing a good job and needing to build some of that self-trust and that secure base inside to know that, yes, you are doing a good job. And all of that so that you can feel better every day at work. And I am inviting you to come and join that program. And our live calls start in February. So February 2024. And you can join now and start learning on all of those habits that I shared today. How you can move from a low confidence habit to a high confidence habit. And as I said, you can do it. So come and join us in that program. That is a paid program. So it's currently £360 and you'll have lifetime access to that program. You'll have all of the learning materials you need in order to go from a low confidence cycle to a high confidence cycle so that you can feel better, feel more calm, feel more in control. And not only that, you will be able to come and get group coaching with me, get support, ask questions, and really dig into particular confidence challenges or problems that you've got, and I'll help you to figure them out and feel more confident at work. So I should have told you that before, but I didn't. But you are invited. Come and join the Confident at Work program. We'd be delighted to have you and welcome you into the first live call, which starts at the beginning of Feb. I will leave a link in the show notes and you can click on it if you want to have my support and have me walking with you through 2024 as you build your professional confidence. Join us.